Hey guys, it's Julian, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to make resonance record style minimal deep house. I've made a few videos in the style in the past, but today I'm going to be talking about a bunch of new stuff that I've learned since then to make these tracks and hopefully take your tracks to even another level and get them sounding really good. As usual, you can get the full project files, samples, MIDI, presets, everything that you just heard in the intro is available for just $5 on my Bandcamp. The link is right at the top of the description. If you guys enjoyed these videos, definitely consider going to pick that up. It really helps support me. Plus, you get this great resource of sounds to work with and different MIDI and stuff like that. So yeah, link is at the top of the description. I think it's a really great value for $5. Now, on to the project file. The first sound we have here is the bass line, which sounds like this. So this is a pretty simple bass line in G minor. You can see we're using this little Logic swing over here. I have that on everything. I really like using the Logic swings because it can kind of give a more like even groove. Like with this really tight minimal house stuff, like you want everything to kind of have the exact same groove. Even if they have that swing to them, it needs to be like at the exact same time with every instrument. So using a swing rather than just like going through and moving your 16th notes like that, you know, just doing it with the groove there, can make that really uniform. And like I said, it's a really simple bass line in G minor. So we're using G, so our root note, our third, our fourth, and then our fifth. And then this here is the minor seventh, which is a very simple or a very complicated way of saying two notes down from the root note. So very simple bass line, but it's all about just having that kind of like simple one bar thing that can keep repeating and kind of keep that groove going. Especially like bouncing off of the kick like that. So, for the sound on this one, you'll see it's actually very simple. What we're doing here is pretty much all inside of Operator. And this is the first thing that I would say is kind of like a new thing that I picked up on with this style. Is like, you don't always have to use so much saturation and drum buss and stuff like that to get your bass to sound really fat. As you can see, like, it's really full sounding. You know, it's right there in the track, punching through. And all it is just some well-programmed synthesis. So, what's happening here is it's a saw wave and a sine wave. There's no FM happening, you can see. And then they're going into a low-pass filter, which has a very subtle envelope on it. And there's two things about the filter that are going to be really important for getting the like fullness out of the bass. It's the envelope amount, and then also the resonance. And both of these are kind of subtle. Like, you have to kind of like really dial it in, as you can see. But when you get the right amount of envelope and the right amount of resonance, it brings out that like perfect bassiness. Like, if I turn the resonance down, it's not quite as full sounding. So that can really help with that. And the other thing here is I'm using the sine shaper just to make it a little bit fatter. Here's without. And then with it. Really subtle, but just gives it that extra push. And then finally, it's just being sidechained to the kick. And again, if you just have like a really good bass patch, a good bass line, you don't need all that extra processing. Then we have the kick. And so this is kind of the same deal as with the bass. You can see, like, if you just have a really good kick like this, all you really have to do is just level it out. This is one that I've made. It's like some 909s layered together. But yeah, like, I think also with some samples. But like, one thing that you'll see here is I have the spectrum and I have the tuner here. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about tuning your kick for this style of house, because I think it's really important, like, just getting that like proper kind of balance between the kick and the bass. And if you don't tune your kick, you're really not going to get that. So the way I've done this here is, as you can see, like, the kick doesn't always just come up on the tuner. So what you can do is, there's a few ways of doing this. You can see I pitched this one to get it in key. You can pitch it up like an octave or something like that, or 2 octaves. And then you can kind of hear it be in key a little bit easier if you have that musical ear. What we can also do is use the spectrum here, because if you look at it, you can see, like, see how there's that point there, which is kind of like the loudest? So if you look at it, you can see it's right on G, like right in the middle there where that's hitting. And so that's how you can kind of tell the key. And then there's also like some stuff down here. But yeah, like, there we are. It's hitting right on G there in the lowest point. So that's what you want to look for, is like the loudest thing there. Whatever frequency that is, that's the note you're at. And obviously you can see, you know, it's kind of a fine thing here because we can move very quickly away from it. But yeah, so that's an easy way to get the kick in tune. And then you can see, like, if I put it to, like, if I put it down -2, all of a sudden now, the loudest point is F. So it does work, and it's a really good way to tune your kick if you're having a hard time. But you really need to make sure that your kick and your bass are in tune for the style. Then we have our clap. which really not too much to this one. You know, it's just this nice Lin clap, like from the Lin drum machine. I've shortened it a little bit with the amplitude envelope to make it kind of sit on the kick better. And we also have this really short reverb on there just to give it some space. Then we have our open hi-hat, which is 2 layers. And so what's happening here is we have this one, which is more of a mid-range, kind of like punchy hi-hat. And then this one, which is just doing like the bright highs. And so this is the thing also, like a lot of times in the past, I think I used to use like a lot of saturation and stuff like that on the hi-hats. But you really don't need that, because if you just have like 2 sounds like this, they complement each other really well and kind of fill out the whole thing. Like one's doing the mid-range, one's doing the bright highs. You know, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. Like, you're not really going to need all that extra processing. It's just really fat because these are sitting side by side. Then we have these bonus hi-hats, which kind of just play off of that hi-hat. You can see, like, there's just a bunch of these here in the drum rack, and I made a little pattern with them. The thing that's interesting with these is they're actually panning. You can see I have an auto pan on there. And it just kind of gives them some movement and helps to set them apart from the other hi-hats as well, because we have this shaker here just going tick, tick, tick. So now you can hear when I bring the bonus hi-hats over top of that, it really fills that out. And then we have like all this little percussion down here, you know, just like the little background stuff. You can see it's 5 layers, and actually one of them is a drum rack. So really it's like 7 layers. We can hear all this stuff is constantly happening in the background of the track. And that's pretty much what you want. Like with this percussion, you're pretty much going to have something playing on almost every single 16th note, right? Like this is, like it's really just going through the whole thing. But then where the nuance in that comes is from essentially like having like, you know, the one on this 16th note might be a little bit louder, and then the one on this 16th note, the next one right after that, might be a little bit quieter. So then you get like a lot of groove from that. You know, like obviously, yeah, these are kind of just constantly playing. But the groove comes in the nuance between the different sounds, like some being a little bit louder, some being a little bit higher pitched. All of that stuff comes together. And yeah, then we have our chord steps, which as you can see, there's 4 of them. So we start with these 2, which are actually really similar. They're kind of based on the same patch. So with these, I was trying to make some like stabs that sounded sampled, but using a synth. And there's a few techniques we can use to get that. Now, for the actual chords, that's kind of where it starts, because what's happening here is you can see these are playing kind of like more interesting chords. The G minor, you can see those are the 3 basic G minor chord notes, but then we're also adding in this 4th, and then that 9th there as well. So it's technically like a G minor 9. And that's the first thing that's going to make your chords feel a little bit less kind of like boring and synthy. It's just, you're using interesting voices on the chords. Here you can see it's that same chord, but without the 4th. So we just have the 9th up there. And yeah, those are pretty simple. The other thing you'll notice though is that they kind of play off each other. Like we get duh. So you definitely want to make sure these are kind of grooving together. And so for the sound, they're both made with analog. What's happening here is you can see this first one is a square wave and a saw wave going into a bandpass filter. You can see it's got a pretty high resonance. I've got an envelope on there as well, which is giving it that pluck. And then you can see we have the key knob turned up. And so that's key tracking. So essentially, this is really interesting for these chords because key tracking basically says like wherever you play on the keyboard, the filter frequency will be a little bit higher or lower based on where you play. And so when you have chords that are playing across the keyboard like this, you can actually get some very interesting and nuanced sounds out of it because each note in the chord is at a different place on the filter. Especially when it's like bouncing down like that. And then you can see if I turn off the key tracking, you know, it's a lot more dull sounding. So that's really important. And it's a good way to make these feel really lively. And the amp envelope is set like that. And then just have a bit of chorus and some 8th note echo, a really short reverb, and then a high pass filter. And the second one is a pretty similar patch. Like you can see, this one's 2 saw waves actually detuned a little, and then that's got the low pass filter, but with that same key tracking. And then with this one, you can see what I'm doing is I actually have a band pass filter, which I'm automating. And that's a good way to make this one kind of move, because one thing is that like if you just have these playing over and over without this, you know, it can get a bit flat. It's the same thing over and over. But then when you add this, all of a sudden, one of these is moving around, so it's going to make it a lot more dynamic. And that's got that same echo and short reverb and then a high pass filter. So those are like your main stabs. I would always start with those, and then we move over to these two, which you'll notice these two are a lot more sparse. They really just hit like at the end of every 2 bars. So you can see it's this one and this one. So these are actually playing the same chord. You can see this is playing that G minor with the 9th up top, and then this one here is playing that exact same chord actually. But what's happening is at the exact note where that hits, like right here, the bass was actually playing F. It wasn't playing G. So if I put this on G and just make it the regular G minor chord, it's going to kind of clash with the bass line. So what I did to make it simple is I have the same chord, but I moved the root down to F, just so that it's not clashing with the bass line. Versus like if we put that up to G, you'll see it gets kind of messy. So yeah, little subtle stuff that you can do to kind of like break the chords, but make it fit better with your track. And for the sound on the first one, it's made with operators. So what this is it's actually just 2 sine waves. You can see what's happening is I have the second one up +5. So that's what makes it that like more metallic, kind of airy sort of texture. I have a low pass filter on that as well, which is just kind of bringing out, like you can see there's a lot of really sharp highs there. So that's just kind of making it a bit deeper while still keeping the high sound. And then I just have a bit of chorus, a bit of reverb, and then this is also being sidechained to the kick. And then for this one, it's made with analog. So yeah, this one is just 2 saw waves going into a low pass filter with a bit of an envelope. I've also got key tracking on that. The amp envelope is like that, and then we just have some vibrato in unison, a bit of chorus, and reverb. So pretty simple to make these, but it's important to have that contrast between like the ones that are playing here and then the ones that play at the end of the bars. Like you gotta make sure you don't just have the little but also you have this whole that as well. Like everything, you gotta make sure you have everything, or else if you just have like these main ones, it's gonna be a bit flat. Then we have this little synth pluck, which sounds like this. So this is a really subtle element. You don't really notice it that much right on the first listen. It's kind of like a cross between percussion and a synth. And what's happening here is like if I turn this off though, you can really hear it. So you don't quite bob your head as much without it. So having something like this can be really, really effective for your tracks. And all it's doing is it's just playing G. Just dun, dun, on the upbeats. And then there's a little dun, dun. And it's just a simple FM patch where it's just 2 sine waves, one's an octave up. You can see it's kind of like shortened and a little bit more plucky. And then it just goes through a bit of echo and some drum bass. And the echo is like on this 8th note echo. So you're getting kind of like dun 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 dun. But then the interesting thing is then when you throw in that dun dun, this note all of a sudden starts throwing off a bunch of echoes. So it goes dun 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 dun. So it's kind of using the MIDI and the effects together to create the sound. And that's how you're gonna create like a truly fluid sound that feels like it's come to life and it's not just like a boring synth. And the last thing we have down here are these vocals, which the vocals in these style tracks, you know, there's usually a little bit more work than you would hear in like a standard minimal deep house track. So I have just this one, just that yeah right on the 1 every 4 bars with some echo and reverb. You know, just to kind of like start it over. And there's also this little background one. And what I did with this one is I actually took this vocal sample. I'll show you what I did. It's this. And I just took it and chopped it up and got these little like hits. And then what's happening is it's going through a bandpass filter with an LFO, a little bit of echo, and then it's also being sidechained to the kick. But really the thing about this is like where it fits into the track rhythmically. You know, it's right on that upbeat after the claps. You get like the idea here is that there's a lot of 16th notes happening, right? So to have this one just straight eighth note like grooving thing, you know, it really adds like a lot to that groove, and it sits over top of it really nicely. So I really recommend considering that. Like, you know, you don't just want to have in the background. You also got to have some eighth notes and some quarter notes. You know, it's all about the contrast between these different intervals here. And then also just having this one move around like with the LFO. So it's never exactly the same thing twice. And yeah, so that is going to be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. And let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get this full project file, samples, MIDI, presets. Everything from this video is available right at the top of the description on my Bandcamp. So definitely go check that out if you guys enjoyed these videos. It really helps support me. You get a bunch of great production resources, and it's only $5. So link is at the top of the description. It's also available on my Patreon if you're a patron. Thank you so much, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.